You'd think I didn't exist, my son, Tyler, spat, voice shaking with rage and entitlement. Since you can't even get out of bed to show up for Mom's funeral. The words hit me like a freight train. His mother, my late wife, had passed 2 days ago, and here I was, sitting in the hospital chapel alone, because Tyler and his wife Megan decided her birthday was more important than saying goodbye. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. My name's Robert Rob Patterson. I'm 59, born and raised in the small town of Cedar Grove, Indiana. I spent my life working hard, farming, coaching Little League, fixing roofs, anything, to keep the family afloat after Susan left me when Tyler was 12. I raised him the best I could, balancing 2 jobs and school meetings, and never once missed a game or a recital. After Susan walked out, Tyler became everything. My responsibility, my joy, my world. I co-signed his first car loan, saved for his college tuition, and never asked for much in return. But over the years, something changed. Tyler grew distant. Life with Megan, her family's influence, the small-town gossip, they all pushed him away from me. Birthdays, holidays, even his own accomplishments, became excuses for them to disregard the man who raised him. I remember sitting at that hospital chapel, the smell of antiseptic mixed with flowers, the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead, thinking about the years I'd sacrificed. I had given everything I had to keep him on the straight path, and yet here I was, betrayed on the day I most needed my son by my side. The funeral director tapped his watch, quietly urging me to go with the procession. Tyler didn't even look my way. Megan held his hand tightly, whispering, probably reminding him why he made the choice he did. I wanted to yell, to shake him, and demand respect. But instead, I took a deep breath and let it all simmer. Because rage, like grief, burns better when controlled. As I left the chapel, I passed old neighbors who offered sympathetic nods. They all knew the story. Cedar Grove was small. Word traveled fast. Everyone had an opinion, but nobody had the full picture. My truck creaked under me as I slid behind the wheel. The snow outside was melting into a gray slush, leaving the roads slick. I started driving toward home, letting the town fade behind me. Tyler had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. Something inside me hardened in that ride. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also sharpens resolve. Tyler may have abandoned me at my lowest point, but that didn't mean he'd get away with it. Not in my town. Not with the life I'd built. I parked by my old farmhouse and stepped inside. The charm smell of wood polish and faint diesel lingered. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat in my recliner, and stared at the window as the snow turned to ice on the fields outside. I knew what I had to do, not out of spite, not purely for revenge, but to reclaim dignity, to show Tyler the consequences of forgetting who raised him, and to finally secure the respect I deserved. And that's when the idea struck, a way to remind him of the values I'd taught him, a way to flip the betrayal back on him. It wouldn't be easy. It would take patience, strategy, and a little help from the small-town systems I knew all too well. Banks, lawyers, property deeds, gossip networks, and the stubborn town council. But I was ready, because sometimes justice isn't served in an instant. Sometimes it's measured, calculated, and slow. And that's exactly how I plan to take it. The first step was to gather all the facts: Tyler's finances, the couple's mortgage, their small investments, the town's rumors, everything. I'd use their own choices against them, and I'd make sure the lesson they learned was unforgettable. And as I sat there that evening, Sipping coffee and letting the winter chill seep into my bones, I promised myself one thing. The next time Tyler looked me in the eyes, he wouldn't see the same father he'd brushed aside. He'd see a man who had endured betrayal, but who still had the power to take back what was his. The game was set, and soon the first pieces would move. The next morning, I stopped by Cedar Grove Bank. I needed to see exactly where Tyler and Megan stood financially. They always boasted about being responsible with money. Yet I had a feeling there were cracks in their armor. Rob greeted my old friend and loan officer, Jeff Matthews, a wiry man with thinning hair and a permanent, skeptical look. "What brings you in this early?" "I need a favor, Jeff. Just information. Confidential." He raised an eyebrow. "You're not trying to dig up trouble on your son, are you?" I smiled faintly. "Just checking on some numbers. Call it future planning." Jeff nodded. "All right. But you know, it's private. I can give you the facts, not the gossip." I left the bank with more than I expected. Tyler and Megan's mortgage was already behind 2 months. They had a second line credit they were barely keeping up with, and the loan on their new SUV was stretching them thin. Perfect. Later that day, I went to Miller's Diner, the unofficial hub of Cedar Grove gossip. As I walked in, the smell of pancakes and bacon hit me like a memory. I slid into my usual booth. "Morning, Rob," said Sue, the waitress, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. "How you holding up?" I nodded, eyes scanning the room. Same as always. From the corner of the diner, I saw them, Tyler and Megan, laughing, oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering. I took a slow sip of coffee and leaned back, listening. People started talking, quietly at first, then louder. "Did you hear about Rob? I think he's planning something." One neighbor whispered. "Something? He's always been smart." "Careful," another replied. I smiled. Let them whisper. By the time they realized what was coming, it would be too late. That evening, I stopped by Tyler and Megan's house under the guise of dropping off some old photo albums. "Dad?" Megan asked, voice sweet but eyes suspicious. "What are you doing here?" "I thought you might like to look through these," I said, handing over the albums. Some memories of Tyler growing up. Tyler grabbed one, flipping through. "Wow, I haven't seen some of these since, well, never." I watched them, noting the tension in their shoulders. They had no idea how carefully I'd been observing, learning, planning. "You know, Dad," Tyler said finally, voice sharp, "we really didn't expect you at the funeral. You probably should have just stayed home. Nobody needs the lecture from you." I let out a slow breath, my calm voice filling the room. "Funny, Tyler. I spent years making sure you had what you needed. College, your first car, everything I could scrape together. And you think a lecture is what I want? No. I want fairness. And I've learned that fairness sometimes has to be earned the hard way." Megan tisked. "Oh, come on, Rob. Don't start acting like this is a game. Funerals aren't about money or—" I cut her off. "No, Megan. But choices are. And yours last week at your mother's funeral spoke volumes." They both stiffened. "And choices," I added, "have consequences." I left their driveway with a quiet satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The pieces were in place, and all I needed was time, because Cedar Grove was a small town. Gossip moved faster than the wind. Bank notices didn't stay secret. And people like Tyler and Megan, they were about to find out exactly how fragile their world really was. As I drove home, the winter sky darkened. Snow had started again, dusting the fields with silence. Perfect silence. I knew the next time I confronted them, it wouldn't be words or warnings. It would be the reality of consequences, and it would hit them hard. I spent the next week quietly gathering information. Every detail about Tyler and Megan's finances, their mortgage, the SUV loan, credit lines, and small investments. I even visited the county clerk's office to double-check property deeds and liens. Small towns like Cedar Grove had a way of hiding secrets in plain sight, and I intended to use every one of them. Next, I contacted my old lawyer, Helen Carver. Sharp as a tack, and not a soul in Cedar Grove could pull a fast one past her. "Rob," she said over the phone, "what you're planning? It needs to be methodical, careful, public enough to make a statement, but legally untouchable. Are you ready for that?" "I am," I replied. "This isn't about anger. This is about setting things right," she chuckled. "Right. You've got patience, Rob. That's your secret weapon. Now, let's get to work." We drafted a plan. First, I would quietly secure my own finances, putting them into a trust. Second, I'd let the town whisper, quietly at first, about Tyler and Megan's financial instability. Mortgages behind, bills overdue, the usual small-town murmurs that grow into a storm. By midweek, the gossip network started working for me. I ran into neighbors at Miller's Diner, making casual comments about overdue bills, late payments, and legal notices. Nothing overt, just enough to plant seeds. "Did you hear about the Andersons' mortgage?" one neighbor asked me, trying to make conversation. "Oh, yeah," I said casually, sipping coffee. Sometimes it's tough keeping up. People don't always realize how fast things pile up. Tyler's friends started dropping hints at work about unpaid bills and repo notices. The pressure built slowly, methodically. Meanwhile, I set my eyes on the ultimate leverage, a loan Tyler and Megan had taken out against their house. If missed payments escalated, foreclosure would be inevitable. One evening, I stopped by my attorney's office to review the last steps. Helen handed me the files. "Rob, once you release this, there's no going back. You're essentially letting them face the consequences of their choices in full view." I nodded. Exactly. They made the choices. Now they live with them. I'm just giving them the mirror. By Friday, the tension was palpable. I received a phone call from a neighbor, voice hushed. "Rob, you might want to check on Tyler. Heard he's in a tizzy." Something about the bank calling him non-stop. I smiled quietly, knowing my careful plan was working. That night, I sat in my recliner, staring at the snow falling outside. A cup of coffee in my hand, the winter chill seeping into my bones. My heart was steady, calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was prepared for the Sunday dinner confrontation I'd been planning. Because Cedar Grove was small, people talk, and I intended to make the conversation unavoidable. A family dinner, public and visible, where Tyler and Megan would be confronted not with words, but with the results of their own decisions. I reviewed the plan, secure my finances, into an untouchable trust. Let small-town gossip amplify Tyler and Megan's financial stress. Position myself at the Sunday dinner, calm, composed, and in full control. Reveal the truth, legally and publicly, leaving them no room to argue or weasel out. It was a chess game, and I was about to checkmate. As the snow fell heavier outside, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming dignity in a life where I'd given everything to my family and received nothing but scorn in return. And when the right moment came, Tyler and Megan would finally understand exactly who I was and exactly what happens when you ignore the father who raised you. Sunday arrived cold and gray, the kind of winter day that presses its weight into your bones. I drove past the familiar streets of Cedar Grove, the snow crunching under my tires, and felt the calm settle over me. Today, the game ended. I arrived at Tyler and Megan's house just as the sun was dipping behind the trees. The warm glow of their kitchen lights cut through the cold, a stark contrast to the storm of consequences I had prepared. Inside, the table was set for 4: Tyler, Megan, their friends from town, and me, the last person they expected to see, carrying authority and composure. Tyler greeted me with a tight smile. "Dad, you came." I nodded, quietly taking my seat at the head of the table. "I did, and I hope you're ready for a little reality check." Dinner began normally enough. Chicken, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes. Conversation hovered over work and small-town news until I let my first piece of information drop. "So, Tyler," I said casually, stirring my tea, "I heard from Jeff at the bank that your mortgage is 2 months behind. Is that right?" Tyler laughed nervously. Yeah. Things have been tight lately. We'll catch up." Megan's face went pale, and she tried to deflect. "Rob, we're working on it. It's—" I held up a hand, calm and measured. "No need to explain. Mistakes happen. But it's important to face them. And then there's the SUV loan and the line of credit you've been juggling. Not exactly the picture of stability you like to show the world, huh?" A heavy silence settled. Tyler's hand tightened around his fork. I slid the last piece onto the table, proof of their growing financial troubles, verified and undeniable. "I just want to make sure you understand consequences. Not out of anger, but because choices have results." Tyler's face reddened. This isn't fair, Dad. You can't just—" I interrupted him, calm, steady. "I can. Because this isn't punishment, it's transparency. And you should have remembered, transparency is part of life when you mock the people who raised you." Megan shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed the first cracks in their facade. The friends they invited shifted in their seats, whispering to each other, eyes darting between the couple and me. Finally, I leaned back and let it settle. "You see, Tyler, Megan, for decades I gave everything to make sure you could live without fear. And all I got in return was distance, excuses, and disregard. But today, the reality speaks louder than words ever could." I stood, placing my hand on the back of my chair. "This house, your credit, your little life of convenience, it all rests on choices you made. And when the bank calls, when the notices arrive, when neighbors whisper, it won't be a joke anymore. It'll be a lesson." Tyler opened his mouth, but no words came. Megan's eyes glistened with tears. And in that quiet, cold kitchen, I felt it. The satisfaction of calm, measured justice. I smiled gently. "You wanted to see me as powerless, as irrelevant. But I assure you, I am very relevant. And your choices have finally proven it." I grabbed my coat and walked to the door, leaving the weight of consequence behind me. Tyler and Megan would never forget this night. Not the humiliation, not the lesson. Because for the first time in years, they saw clearly the man they tried to ignore, and the power of the father who had been there all along. The week after the dinner was a quiet storm. Tyler and Megan didn't call. They didn't stop by. Cedar Grove's whispers spread faster than wildfire, and I could feel the town's eyes on them, judging, noticing, remembering the choices they had made. By Thursday, the bank had begun foreclosure proceedings on their home. Their SUV was repossessed. Their line of credit was maxed and frozen, and the couple who once laughed at my existence were now scrambling for help, unsure where to turn. One morning, I received a call from Jessica's friend at the diner. "Rob, you'll want to see this," she said. I went over and learned that Tyler had tried to refinance, only to be denied, and the rumors of their financial mess had reached the county newspaper. The story was factual, clean, and public. Exactly the lesson I had intended. I smiled. The irony was sweet. The son who once skipped his mother's funeral for his wife's birthday was now learning that choices carry consequences, and no one can escape them, not even him. Meanwhile, I settled into my own life. I refinanced my modest farmhouse, finally, clearing the small debts I had carried for years. I didn't need the money to show off, to flaunt, or to punish. I needed peace. Quiet mornings with coffee by the fireplace, long walks through the fields, evenings spent at Miller's Diner, where everyone now treated me with the respect I had earned long ago. Occasionally, I saw Tyler and Megan from a distance, driving their old, worn-out car past my place, heads low, their pride shattered. They had money worries, community whispers, and the realization that they had underestimated the man they had betrayed. And me? I finally slept at night, without the gnawing pain of betrayal. My dignity intact, my patience rewarded, my peace restored. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, justice, the natural consequence of a life of neglect, arrogance, and disregard for those who had given everything. Sometimes, when I pass the diner, neighbors wave and whisper, "Rob, you handled that perfectly." I just nod, sipping my coffee. Words are unnecessary. The lesson was already learned. The lottery of life, I've discovered, isn't about winning money. It's about knowing your value, standing firm in the face of betrayal, and letting the natural course of consequence unfold. They gave me nothing when it mattered most. But now, they've lost everything because of choices they made. And I've gained the one thing they could never take from me: respect, dignity, and peace. And in that, I am richer than I ever imagined. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.